1998, Congo classified. Delta Force medics' final report on the hibernating predators we should never have found before we start. Hit that subscribe to support Battleground Archive and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. They weren't fossils. And to be clear, we do not confirm or verify these news reports. This video is an analytical interpretation of the topic and has been fully researched, analyzed, and produced by our team. That's the first thing you need to understand about what we found in the Congo rainforest in 1998. The archaeological team called us for extraction because they discovered something that rewrote human evolution. But when we arrived, we realized they hadn't found ancient bones. They had found sleeping giants. My name is Dr. Marcus Reeves, former Delta Force combat medic, and this is my final report on Operation Deep Forest. The classified mission that should have been a simple rescue but became humanity's closest brush with extinction. What I'm about to tell you violates every oath I've taken, but 25 years of nightmares have convinced me the world needs to know. Because they're still down there, and they're starting to wake up. The call came at 0347 hours on March 15, 1998. I was catching sleep between training rotations at Fort Bragg when my secure phone buzzed with a priority extraction order. The briefing was sparse. Archaeological team missing in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Hostile environment. Medical expertise required. Standard stuff, or so I thought. 6 hours later, I was on a C-130 with 5 other operators, flying toward Kinshasa with gear that didn't make sense for a simple extraction. Experimental sedatives, containment protocols, biosuit modifications. When I asked Captain Torres about the unusual medical kit, he just said the target had requested specialized biological support. The target was Dr. Sarah Chen, a Harvard anthropologist leading a joint expedition with the Smithsonian and the Max Planck Institute. Her team had been radio silent for 8 days after reporting a significant discovery in the remote Ituri forest. Their last transmission mentioned finding a cave system with evidence of human occupation dating back 6 million years. 6 million years. That's 3 million years before the earliest known hominids. We inserted at dawn via helicopter, landing in a clearing 12 kilometers from the team's last known position. The jungle was unlike anything I'd experienced. The canopy was so dense that noon felt like twilight, and the air was thick with humidity that made breathing feel like drowning. But it was the silence that got to me first. No birds, no insects, no animal sounds at all. Sergeant Williams, our tracker, found their trail within an hour. The archaeologists had carved a path through the undergrowth heading northeast toward a ridgeline marked on no official maps. What bothered Williams was how clean the trail was. "Sir," he said, kneeling beside a cut vine. "This was done with something sharp, but look at the edges. Too clean for a machete, too precise." I examined the cut. It was perfect, like the vine had been severed by a blade so sharp it left no tearing, no bruising of the plant tissue, the kind of precision you'd expect from a surgical scalpel, not jungle equipment. We followed the trail for 3 hours, moving through terrain that grew increasingly strange. The trees changed. Ancient species I didn't recognize, some with bark patterns that looked almost like writing. The ground beneath our feet shifted from jungle floor to something that felt artificial. Too regular, like walking on manufactured stone. Then we found the first marker. It was carved into a massive tree trunk, symbols that definitely weren't human. Not Bantu, not Arabic, not any indigenous script from the region. The carving was deep, weathered, but still clearly visible. What made my skin crawl was how high up it was. The bottom edge of the symbol started 8 feet off the ground. "Dr. Chen's team didn't make this," Torres said, studying the marking through his scope. "This is old. Really old." We found 17 more markers over the next 2 kilometers, each one higher than the last. By the time we reached the ridge, the symbols were carved 15 feet above ground level. Whatever made them was either using sophisticated equipment or was much taller than any human. The cave entrance was hidden behind a waterfall, a natural passage about 12 feet high and 6 feet wide. Fresh boot prints in the mud showed Dr. Chen's team had entered here. But there were other prints too. Barefoot impressions in the soft earth that measured 14 inches long and showed 6 toes instead of 5. "Could be fake," suggested Davis, our communications specialist. Archaeological teams sometimes stage discoveries for funding. I knelt beside the clearest print. The toes showed natural variation, different lengths, slight asymmetry. the kind of details that would be nearly impossible to fake convincingly. More importantly, the depth and pressure distribution suggested something weighing at least 300 pounds had made this impression. "This isn't fake," I said. "But it's not human either." We activated night vision and entered the cave system. The passage sloped downward for about 50 meters before opening into a vast chamber. Our lights revealed carved walls covered in more of those symbols, but these were different, more complex, arranged in patterns that suggested language or mathematics. Dr. Chen's equipment was scattered throughout the chamber. Cameras, measurement tools, sample containers, all abandoned in apparent haste. But no bodies, no blood, no signs of violence. What we found instead were the sleeping chambers. The first chamber was hidden behind a section of wall that had been carefully removed and stacked to one side. Dr. Chen's team had broken through into a space that had been sealed for millennia. The air that rushed out carried a smell I'll never forget. Not decay, but something organic and ancient, like opening a tomb that had been breathing for thousands of years. Inside, carved into the living rock, were alcoves, dozens of them, arranged in precise rows along the walls. Each alcove was roughly human-sized, but scaled up, 9 feet long, 3 feet wide, 2 feet deep. And in 17 of the alcoves, we found them. They weren't skeletons. They weren't mummies. They were sleeping. The first one I examined was incredible. It looked human, but wrong in every proportion. 9 feet tall, with limbs that were too long, fingers that had too many joints. The skull was elongated, with a cranial capacity maybe 40% larger than modern humans. The skin had a gray-green tint and felt cool to the touch, but there was definitely circulation. Faint. Slow, but present. "Jesus Christ," whispered Rodriguez, our demolitions expert. "Are they alive?" I checked for vital signs with my medical equipment. Heart rate of maybe 2 beats per minute. Respiration so shallow I could barely detect it. Brain activity that showed deep, deep sleep, but definite neural function. These weren't corpses preserved by some natural process. They were in some form of hibernation. "Doc," Torres called from across the chamber. "You need to see this." He was standing beside an alcove that was empty, but showed recent disturbance. The stone surface was scratched, as if something with claws had scraped against it while getting out. Fresh stone dust on the floor suggested this had happened recently, very recently. "How many empty alcoves do you count?" I asked. We did a quick survey. The chamber contained 67 alcoves total. 17 were occupied. 43 were empty but showed no signs of recent disturbance, probably empty for centuries or millennia. But 7 alcoves showed fresh scratching, recent stone dust, body impressions still warm to the touch. 7 of them had awakened in the past few days. "The archaeological team," Torres said grimly. "They didn't just find these things. They woke them up." We found Dr. Chen's notes scattered near the chamber entrance. Her handwriting showed increasing excitement and then growing concern. March 7th. Incredible discovery. Cave system appears artificial. Symbols suggest advanced civilization predating known human development by millions of years. March 8th. Breakthrough into sealed chamber. Found what appears to be burial site, but preservation is impossible. Specimens appear almost fresh despite obvious age of site. March 9th. Specimens not deceased. Vital signs detected. Appear to be in suspended animation. Revolutionary implications for understanding of human evolution. March 10th. 3 specimens showing increased neural activity. Temperature rising. Possible awakening process initiated by our presence. March 11th. Urgent. Need immediate extraction. Specimens fully awakened. Not human. Hostile. They're hunting us. The final entry was March 12th, written in shaky handwriting. 2 team members taken. Remaining in deeper caves. They're learning. They understand our language. God help us all. That was 3 days ago. We need to find the survivors, Torres decided. But we also need to understand what we're dealing with. Doc, can you tell anything more about these sleeping ones? I spent another 30 minutes examining the hibernating specimens with my medical equipment. What I found challenged everything I thought I knew about biology. Their cellular structure showed signs of extreme longevity. Tissues that should have degraded millennia ago were perfectly preserved. Their brain scans revealed neural complexity far exceeding modern humans. But most disturbing were the modifications. These weren't natural evolutionary developments. Someone or something had altered these beings at a genetic level. Enhanced muscle density, reinforced bone structure, modifications to the nervous system that allowed for extended hibernation. This was engineered evolution. A sound from the deeper passages interrupted my examination. Not human voices, but something else. Communication of some kind. Clicks and whistles and low-frequency tones that seemed to carry meaning. The sounds were getting closer. "Pack up," Torres ordered. "We're moving deeper to find the survivors." The passage leading away from the sleeping chamber descended steeply, carved from solid rock with the same impossible precision we'd seen throughout the system. Our lights revealed more chambers, each one larger than the last, until we emerged into a space so vast our illumination couldn't reach the walls or ceiling. But we could hear them moving out there in the darkness. Soft footsteps that didn't sound quite right. Too many joints in the legs, maybe, or different proportions than human anatomy would allow. And that clicking communication, now coming from multiple directions. "They're surrounding us," Davis whispered into his radio. That's when we heard Dr. Chen's voice calling from somewhere ahead in the darkness. "Stay back. Don't come any closer. They've learned to mimic human speech, but they're not human. There's something else." We advanced cautiously, weapons ready, following her voice. What we found was a makeshift camp in a side chamber. Dr. Chen and 2 graduate students huddled around a failing battery-powered lamp. They looked like they hadn't slept in days, their faces gaunt with terror and exhaustion. "Thank God!" Dr. Chen gasped when she saw us. "But you shouldn't have come. This whole system is their territory. They've been asleep for millennia, but our intrusion triggered some kind of awakening protocol." She gestured toward deeper passages. "There are hundreds of them down there, maybe thousands, all waking up. And they remember." "Remember what?" I asked. "The last time humans entered their domain. They have some form of genetic memory, passed down through their hibernation cycles. They remember being hunted, being driven underground, and they remember fighting back." One of the graduate students, a young man named Parker, was in bad shape. Deep scratches across his chest, signs of infection, and symptoms I didn't recognize. Pupils dilated, rapid heartbeat, skin temperature dropping despite fever. Something had injected him with a toxin I couldn't identify. "They don't just hunt," Dr. Chen continued. "They study their prey, learn behavioral patterns, adapt their tactics. In 3 days, they've gone from primitive awakening responses to sophisticated group hunting strategies." The clicking sounds were getting closer, now coming from passages on all sides of our position. We were surrounded. "How many team members did you lose?" Torres asked grimly. 4 taken alive, Dr. Chen replied. "They don't kill immediately, they experiment. Learn about human anatomy, human psychology. I think they're preparing for something larger." That's when the lights went out. Our battery-powered equipment failed simultaneously. Lamps, night vision, even my medical monitors. But the darkness wasn't complete. A faint phosphorescence emanated from the cave walls, just enough to reveal shapes moving at the edges of our vision. They were tall, 9 feet or more, and moved with an eerie grace that suggested perfect adaptation to cave systems. Their eyes reflected what little light was available, showing intelligence and calculation that made my skin crawl. The clicking intensified, and I realized we were listening to tactical communication. They were coordinating an attack. Torres made the call. "Fighting withdrawal to the entrance. Doc, stay with the civilians. Everyone else, covering fire on my mark." The battle that followed was unlike anything I'd experienced in 15 years of military service. These things weren't just physically superior, they were tactically brilliant. They used the cave acoustics to confuse our positioning, employed hit-and-run tactics that maximized their advantages, and adapted to our weapons within minutes. Conventional ammunition barely slowed them down. Their bone structure was too dense, their muscle mass too extensive. But they definitely felt pain, and they showed fear of our more powerful weapons. We fought our way through chamber after chamber, carrying Parker and supporting Dr. Chen's exhausted team. The creatures followed us, but didn't press their attack. They seemed content to herd us toward the entrance, which suggested they had a plan. When we finally reached the sleeping chamber, we discovered why they'd let us retreat. The 17 hibernating specimens were no longer asleep. Their alcoves were empty, and fresh scratch marks showed they'd awakened within the past hour. They were waiting, Dr. Chen realized. The others woke up the sleepers while we were trapped deeper in the system. Now we're facing at least 24 of them, and they know the cave system perfectly while we're operating blind. The entrance passage ahead was too narrow for defensive positions. If they attacked while we were climbing toward the surface, we'd be trapped in a killing zone with no room to maneuver. But we had no choice. Our communications equipment wasn't working in the cave system, so we couldn't call for extraction. Our only hope was reaching the surface and hoping our pickup team was still in position. The climb toward the entrance was a nightmare. They followed us through the passage, staying just out of sight, but making enough noise to ensure we knew they were there. Psychological warfare. They wanted us panicked, making mistakes. When we finally emerged from the cave system behind the waterfall, the jungle was completely silent. No bird calls, no insect noise, nothing. Even the local wildlife had fled from whatever was awakening in the caves. Our helicopter extraction point was 2 kilometers away through dense jungle. With Parker's condition deteriorating and Dr. Chen's team exhausted, it would take at least an hour to reach the pickup zone. An hour of being hunted by things that knew this terrain better than we did. "They're not going to let us leave," Dr. Chen said quietly. "In their genetic memory, humans are a threat that needs to be eliminated. If we escape, we'll bring more humans back. They can't allow that." She was right. As we moved through the jungle, I could see signs of them in the trees. Broken branches at heights no human could reach, claw marks on tree trunks, that same clean cutting of vegetation we'd seen on the original trail. They were pacing us, staying parallel to our route but out of sight. Parker collapsed halfway to the extraction point. His condition had worsened rapidly. The toxin in his system was causing organ failure. I did what I could with field medicine, but I needed proper equipment to save him. That's when Torres made a decision that saved our lives and damned us all at the same time. "Doc," he said, "what would happen if these things reached populated areas?" I looked at Parker's symptoms, thought about the intelligence and adaptability we'd witnessed, considered their obvious physical advantages and apparent immunity to conventional weapons. "They'd be apex predators," I said. "Humans wouldn't stand a chance." Torres nodded grimly and activated his radio, but instead of calling for medical evacuation, he transmitted a code I'd hoped never to hear. "Broken arrow. Nuclear weapon threat." Within 6 hours, the entire region was designated a military exclusion zone. Within 24 hours, a tactical nuclear device was detonated to eliminate a chemical weapons facility that officially had never existed. The cave system, the sleeping chambers, and anything that might have emerged from them were vaporized in a fireball that could be seen from space. Parker died during the helicopter ride to the nearest military hospital. The official cause of death was listed as complications from a spider bite. Dr. Chen and her surviving team members were debriefed for weeks, then reassigned to projects that kept them far from any archaeological work. The mission files were classified at levels I didn't know existed. Everyone involved signed agreements that made our silence a matter of national security. The Congo incident was officially erased from all records. But here's the thing about nuclear weapons: they don't always destroy everything. The cave system extended deeper than our mapping had revealed. The blast sealed the upper chambers, but seismic data suggests extensive passages at lower levels that may have survived. And lately there have been reports, miners in the region finding tunnels that shouldn't exist. Local tribes speaking of things moving in the deep forests, things that hunt at night and leave tracks with too many toes. 3 months ago, I received a package with no return address. Inside was a photograph taken by a geological survey team working 200 kilometers from the original site. It shows a cave entrance, and carved beside it are symbols identical to the ones we found in 1998. Below the symbols, scratched into the rock in letters that clearly weren't human, was a message in English. "We remember, we are awake, we are learning." I've spent 25 years trying to convince myself that we did the right thing, that the nuclear option was the only way to protect humanity from something we weren't equipped to handle. But the nightmares never stopped. And now I'm not sure we stopped anything at all. The truth is, we didn't find fossils in the Congo rainforest. We found the survivors of a war that ended before human civilization began. A species that had been sleeping underground, waiting for the right moment to reclaim a world they remember as theirs. They're still down there, still learning, still remembering, and I think they're getting ready to come home. This is Dr. Marcus Reeves, former Delta Force combat medic, and this is my final report on Operation Deep Forest. If something happens to me, If I disappear or die under suspicious circumstances, know that everything I've told you is true. They weren't fossils, they were sleeping, and now they're awake. The Congo incident was just the beginning. What's coming next will make 1998 look like a practice run. Watch the forests, listen for the clicking, and remember, they learn fast, they adapt faster, and they never forget. The war that ended 6 million years ago is about to resume. And this time, we might not be the ones who win.